From the masked assassin in Saw to America's most prolific serial killer, today we're going to take you through 10 of the world's most dangerous criminals. This 48-year-old clean-cut man with neatly combed black hair is Peter Kürten, born in 1883 in Mülheim, Germany. Although he has the appearance of an ordinary man, he hides terrible secrets behind his ordinary face. From an early age, he had been pursuing strange and deviant erotic fantasies, and after being abused and beaten by his alcoholic parents, he was forced to watch them have sex. This unhealthy childhood turned Peter into a burglar, arsonist, and zoophilic pervert, even before he reached adolescence. As time goes by, his perversions grow, and his fantasies become extremely creepy. At the time this picture was taken, the number of his victims exceeded 80 between murder attempts, rapes, cannibalism, and murders. The one who was nicknamed the Vampire of Düsseldorf because he drank the blood of his victims became the most famous serial killer in Germany and one of the most dangerous criminals in the world. If he had not been arrested and sentenced to the guillotine in 1931, he would certainly have extended the list of his victims. What is even more frightening about this terrible criminal is that until his last breath, he never showed any remorse. Now we come to Jason Barnum, who has a spine-chillingly awful appearance, and there's good reason for it. His tattoos on his body, on his skull, and on his face are terrifying, but it is especially his right eye tattoo in black that is the most frightening, this very eye that even earned him the nickname of Eyeball. And if his appearance doesn't terrify you, wait until you learn more about his criminal pedigree. In fact, Jason is addicted to heroin, and this terrible addiction drives him to get his daily fix by any means necessary. He starts stealing cars and then robbing houses, even in the presence of their owners, to pay for his drugs. Fortunately, his burglaries did not go unpunished for very long, as in 2012, the police managed to locate him in a motel in Alaska. However, instead of surrendering when he is pulled over, he goes on a killing spree. He opens fire at random and ends up wounding a police officer. Luckily, the police officer survives his injury and even manages to arrest this unpredictable madman, who will be described by the world's media as one of the most dangerous criminals in the world. With 33 charges, including vehicle theft, burglary, and attempted murder in 2015, he was sentenced to 22 years in prison, an exemplary sentence that makes him regret his actions, as he stated after his trial. "What I did was wrong. I apologize to the people I caused pain." The man in the photo is Jeffrey Dahmer. He is one of the most dangerous and sadistic serial killers in the world. Yet, he had a seemingly normal childhood, but as an adult, after a brief stint in the US Army, Jeffrey began to have dark and sordid sexual desires. In 1978, when he was just 18 years old, he began to consume massive amounts of alcohol in an attempt to stave off these desires, which he felt were abnormal. But this uncontrollable consumption of alcohol has the opposite effect on the young man, and barely out of his teens, the drink brings out the worst in him. Jeffrey, who seems charming enough at first, becomes a ruthless predator. He begins to frequent gay bars in search of poor or marginal African-American men and lures them to his home with promises of money. Only once alone with his poor prey, he serves them a cocktail of alcohol and drugs before strangling them to death. It's terrifying, but this is only the first part of Jeffrey's macabre fantasies. Once dead, this perverted psychopath engages in all sorts of sexual acts with the corpses of his victims before dismembering them and then eating them while keeping trophies, most often skulls or genitals, as well as photos of the entire murder process. However, it was only after more than 13 years and after having murdered 17 men that the Milwaukee cannibal was finally arrested and sentenced to 16 life sentences. But barely 3 years after his arrest, a fellow inmate who felt that Jeffrey was not sorry for his crimes beat him to death. A horrible end for a horrible man. This image is a collection of all of Samuel Little's mugshots from the time he was 16 years old. They are proof that this man has had a life full of brushes with the law, notably because of an unstable and disturbed childhood due to the prostitution of his mother, who multiplied the stays in prison. The young Samuel, left to his own devices, has the rage and wants to make the whole society pay for his lack of affection. He then begins a real life of delinquency and wandering. He multiplies in his turn the stays in prison through all the American states for robberies, assaults, rapes, as well as attempts of rape. But this is only the tip of the iceberg, because Samuel's desire for revenge on society in general and on women in particular only escalates in the spiral of violence, and his desire for revenge grows stronger with time. Each time he's released, he cannot help but kill women from poor backgrounds, beating them to death or strangling them. In fact, he murdered 93 women until 2012, the year a connection was finally made between unsolved murders and Samuel Little's DNA. So it's not until the age of 72 that the most prolific serial killer in the United States and one of the most dangerous in the world is finally put away with several life sentences. Think the worst criminals are often deranged and unstable people? You will probably change your mind by reading the lines below. The proof is in this family photo. If I tell you that Chris Watts, this exemplary husband and loving family man, is one of the most dangerous, cruel, and vicious criminals the earth has ever borne, you will surely not believe me. And yet, this is the harsh reality. But what crime did this charming-looking man commit? This is the question you are asking yourself now. You think he might be a drug lord or a big fraudster. But the reality is much more sordid than you can imagine. On August 13, 2018, Chris Watts murdered his pregnant wife Shannon in cold blood before throwing his two daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, into 20-foot-high oil tanks at the drilling site where he worked. But after playing the desperate father and husband looking for his missing family in front of the world, he finally confessed to his horrific crimes 3 months after the fact. Chris Watts' crimes are so gruesome that they send chills down your spine. Shannon and her 2 little girls are obviously gone forever, but we can at least take comfort in knowing that their killer will never get out of prison again. Here is now the ogre of our dance. His perverse delusion is to deflower young virgins, then to kill them. But this unhealthy desire is only a fantasy, which only comes to life in his disturbed mind when he meets Monique Olivier, a demonic woman who encourages him to realize his most repressed desires. It is therefore his wife, Monique, who uses trickery to get young girls into her van before handing them over to her pervert husband. This one makes undergo the worst sexual abuses to these young girls and kills them then to satisfy his most glaucous desires. This diabolical scheme allows Michael Fourniret to make at least 11 unfortunate victims and to become one of the most dangerous and Machiavellian serial killers, rapists, and pedophiles in the world. And this from 1981 until 2003, when a 13-year-old girl trapped by Michael Fourniret manages to escape from the hell van and gives the exact description of her kidnapper, which allows his arrest and his life sentence. Today, Michael Fourniret is still suspected in several unsolved murders, but unfortunately, he will never be charged for any other crime, caught up by death of natural causes last May. Nothing more normal than to entrust your life to your doctor, you may say. This is true unless your doctor is Dr. Harold Shipman. Now you're probably wondering, what is wrong with this doctor that you don't trust him? To better understand, we are heading to Hyde, a small town not far from Manchester. More exactly, the Donnybrook Medical Center. It is in this hospital that Harold Shipman practiced as a general practitioner from 1977 to 1998. It was also in this hospital that he deliberately injected lethal doses of morphine into 250 patients throughout his career as Dr. Death. With his phenomenal number of victims and giving his profession, which is in total contradiction with his nature as a dangerous criminal, Harold Shipman is considered one of the worst serial killers in history. Now that you understand what's wrong with this horror doctor, I think every time your doctor offers to give you a shot, you'll be terrified that he's trying to kill you. But don't panic! Fortunately, the world is not made up of murderous criminals, and Shipman's case is only an exception in the medical field, where fortunately we often deal with compassionate staff. Now we head to Russia to discover one of the most dangerous criminals in the world. His name is Alexander Pichushkin. What he loves most is playing chess and murdering strangers. That's how he came up with the idea of killing as many people as there are squares on a chessboard, or 64. At the age of 18, he begins the realization of his perverse and macabre dream. He kills his first victim with a hammer and notes his name and the date of his execution on the first square of his chessboard. 14 years later, in 2006, he is about to realize his dream when he is finally arrested. Unfortunately, one could say, after so many years, only 60 squares of his chessboard are filled. This earns him the nickname, the Chessboard Killer, and a life sentence. Like all deranged psychopaths of his kind, even today, Alexander boasts of having been an outstanding killer who, faced with the incompetence of the police, was forced to intentionally leave clues leading them to him. The man's name is Ted Bundy. He is handsome, intelligent, charming, sociable, and eloquent. Since he was young, he has dreamed of making history by becoming a famous lawyer or a famous politician. But in the meantime, he makes bad choices, letting the wild and barbaric beast inside him get the better of him. While he was destined for a good life and an established professional career thanks to his law studies, he savagely assaulted and murdered 36 young women during the 1970s. A criminal career that allows him to make history, but for the wrong reasons, since he becomes famous for being one of the most dangerous serial killers and psychopaths in the world. Thus, instead of becoming a tenor of the bar, he ended up in the electric chair. Surely you have seen this scary mask before. It is the mask of the killer in the horror movie Saw. Why am I talking about a fictional killer in a video about real criminals? Well, you certainly know that some people are likely to be influenced by movies or video games. This is precisely the case of a 19-year-old German teenager. After watching the movie Saw, Fabian Kramer decided to wear the famous mask from the movie, took a kitchen knife, and brutally murdered his 82-year-old landlady with 50 stab wounds. How can you not be horrified that a fictional movie that was supposed to entertain turned an ordinary teenager into a dangerous criminal? These were 10 of the most memorable criminal cases in history. Tell us in the comments which one surprised you the most.